Hi, I'm Randy Kulik with Amaran Custom Woodworks. My wife Amy and I just finished building this beautiful walnut table, actually for our nephew. It's 5 foot by 3 foot with a 1 foot leaf. Again, Amy did all the finishing. Say hi, Amy.
Hi, Amy.
She's totally muy caliente, but she never wants to be on camera. So anyway, we're going to show you how we built this table. So the first part of this project is building the tabletop. So I'm selecting boards for a glue up. So I'm going to put a straight edge on this board using my track saw and my homemade track. It's kind of hard to see, but you can tell that when you put the straight edge on, when you get to the center of the board, it starts to get thinner relative to the straight edge. Then it gets thicker on the other end. So because my track saw track is perfectly straight, I know the board has a bow. Now that I have a straight edge on one side of the board, I'm going to true up the other side using the table saw. Now I'm starting the process where I'm going to cut all the slots for the biscuits and then join the boards together with biscuits, glue, and blind screw pocket screws. Here's where I'm starting the process of putting in the blind screw pocket holes. With the Foreman made by Craig, it makes this job go pretty quickly. Now it's time for clamps and glue, and I'm making sure that I have clamps above and below the tabletop to make it as straight as possible. As Norm Abrams would say, well, good morning. So I glued up the tabletop in 2 halves, let the glue set overnight, and now I'm putting these 2 very large pieces together into one big piece. So I already put biscuits on the 1 half, so I don't have to worry about getting them in later. And again, I'm using the biscuits more for alignment than anything else. Well, now it's time for a whole lot of sanding. And I have found that when you have to do really aggressive sanding, I use a sander, an air sander, and about an 80 grit sandpaper. I actually looked up what 80 actually represents. I always thought that 80 meant 80 abrasive particles per square inch. And that's actually not the case. Apparently, when they figure out the size of grit, they go through a series of sieves, little screens. And as they go from screen to screen, the screens get finer and finer and finer. And when the particle can go through that screen, but not the next one, that's the size of its grit. Okay. All right, now for the fun and kind of scary part. I'm gonna clean up one edge here to start sizing up this table. The scary part is that you got to make sure you have a perfectly good right angle, otherwise you've just ruined hundreds and hundreds of dollars of walnut and days of work. Okay, now it's time to start working on the legs. These legs are going to be splayed out in two directions. So here's what I'm basically starting with. It's going to be two pieces of wood glued together at 90 degrees. That's the simple part. After that, you need to have an angle going this way, and then you also need to have an angle going this way. So you have to have a compound angle, and those angles have to all be parallel to each other on the top and the bottom of each piece, so that when you set the tabletop on top of the legs will be splayed correctly, but the top will be perfectly straight and true and flat to be able to put on the tabletop. I've concluded that the best splay angle for the legs should be 5 degrees. The blue ruler shows the leg splayed out 5 degrees. The red ruler shows how the leg would look. It was absolutely perfectly 90 degrees to the tabletop. In order to create the curve where the table leg meets the rail, I'm using my 6-inch hole saw. Okay, so I've taken my leg pieces and I have ganged them together into top side left, top side right, top front left, top front right. Because for me, if I don't do it this way, it's going to be very confusing.
A drum sander on my drill press does a great job sanding the edges, especially on curves.
I'm now joining the leg pieces together using glue, brads, and screws. These will form the basic leg pieces. I'm now adding blocking to the leg sections to form the square part of the leg. Now at the point where I can do the final sizing of the two large parts of the table and the leaf. Okay, now it's time to cut the long and short horizontal rails that'll support the tabletop and the leaf. So that dimension is going to be the width from here to here on the leg. Right now it's about 3 3/4 inches. I'm going to cut these a little wide, trim them down later, and make my final cuts to make sure everything is precise. Well, good morning. So now it's time to start laying out the rails. I'm going to circle around back here so you can get an idea of how these legs are now splayed out at 5 degrees. Before I start assembly of the legs to the rails, I have to round over all the sharp edges with a 1/4 inch round over bit. I'm now ready to start assembly of the legs to the short rails. I've cut little blocks at 5 degrees on one side and straight on the other. This will allow clamping to be done more easily as I put in the blind screw pockets. I'm also adding a 1/4 inch piece of plywood, laying it on top of the bar clamp. This will serve as a spacer that allows for a 1/4 inch reveal between the rails and the legs. This will be easier to see after the assembly is completed. Here I am adding a 45-degree chamfer on the underneath part of the tabletops. With a router bit this big, you definitely want to use a router table and a fence. I need to put a chamfer underneath the short edges of the leaf. I'm not using the router fence because that could cause kickback. It's better to use a guide pin as you're guiding the edge into the router bit. Trying to do this freehand could cause severe kickback. Here's the completed leg and rail assembly, ready for the tabletop and leaf slide extensions. Now it's time to start boring the holes for the dowels. Now I'm gluing in the dowels. For this project, I'm using 5/16 diameter dowels. Here is the 5/16 drill bit, and on the left, a 3/8 drill bit. I have to go back and rebore the holes that are going to accept the dowels because a 5/16 hole won't accommodate a 5/16 dowel. Well, good morning. Well, now we're in the home stretch. Going to do a little more sanding on the tabletops and then finally do some assembly. Want to hear more about sandpaper? Didn't think so. Okay. One thing I almost forgot to do. Gonna put a whole bunch of lines on each of the tabletops and then make sure that you catch everything when you're sanding. That was Amy's idea. She is, after all, the finisher. After sanding with 120 grit sandpaper, I cleaned the surface, which shows scratches or dried glue. It also removes the 120 grit particles, which could affect sanding with a finer grit later. An important tip from Tommy Silva of This Old House. Well, after several hours of sanding, I'm now at the point where I can attach the leg system to the underneath part of the table. I also check to make sure that I have the right depth of my screws so that they don't go through to the other side of the tabletop. That wouldn't be good. Well, I'm now at the final step. I'm going to put in the leaf extensions. These are a heavy duty extension, metal teeth, metal gear. I have found the center point of the extension. I'm putting it on the center of the table. I'm using a 1/2 inch spacer so that the extension is a 1/2 inch away from the rails for clearance.
Here's the completed construction of the table, ready for stain and varnish. This is actually a blemish that was in the wood before we started. It actually now adds some character to the piece. JB Weld Wood Restorer mixed with walnut sawdust took care of the problem. Amy is now applying Minwax Natural Color oil-based stain. It really brings out the color of any species of wood that you are using. Here, Amy is applying sanding sealer. Here, Amy is spraying Enduro Green waterborne conversion varnish made by Mohawk. Here's the completed finished table. The natural stain really brings out all the different colors of the walnut, and the Enduro varnish will keep this table looking great for years to come. Hope you enjoyed the build.